Setbacks are temporary, but comebacks, they are legendary. Welcome back to the PSI Effect, where we pause, shift, and ignite purpose that speaks louder than your past. This is Neug, and together with Franky, we're your hosts in this space, and your comeback starts now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PSI podcast. Excited to be with you this week. We got a very special guest that we're going to bring to you today. And we're just going to be, three guys on your listening device, just talking about a few different things. So before we get into that, just want to say hello, Franky. Hello, Kyle. And I've had a very good week, I should say.
Okay.
Had some time with family over the weekend. The weather's been nice. Work's been stress-free for the most part. So I can't really complain.
For
Franky,
the most
how about
part.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
You
I
got to
gotcha.
dodge the stress sometimes. You just got to dodge it.
Dodge, like the spin move, like we're playing some NBA 2K or something. You got to just,
There you go.
got to get away from it. No, my week's been pretty good, man. I can't complain. It has been a little bit busier than I would have liked, but, I don't count that as a bad thing. The crud, as we call it, is going around, the back to school germ. So it's making its way through the house. I'm starting to, feel a little bit of it myself as I got home this afternoon. But then got some really good news that made me forget about the fact that I feel like I'm trying to get sick, is that, my oldest son is a high school senior, and, it's all about the college application process and all of that good stuff. And he got his second acceptance letter in the mail today. And I was just so proud of him because he was, during the summertime, because it's still very early in that college application season. But in the summertime, he was putting in that work when, other friends may have just been chilling out. And he put in early applications. And now, he's seeing the fruits of his labor. He was quite uncomfortable as we were making him do that during the summertime. But now he's running to the mailbox every day just to see if there's another letter. And he was just overjoyed when he saw that letter today. So hopefully there are more to come.
Fantastic. Tell him congratulations.
Will do.
Kyle, how's your week been?
It's been good. Kind of the opposite. It's been a little slow, but we're preparing for a vacation next week, so it's been kind of nice getting to knock some things off the to-do list before heading out on vacation. So I'm not going to complain. Now that I've mentioned it, it'll probably pick up tomorrow on Friday to close out the week, but right now I'm not going to complain.
Oh man, that's how it always goes though. When you're getting ready to go on vacation, everything kicks into high gear right as you're trying to put a bow on things to get out the door.
Indeed. All right, guys, well, we're going to jump right in. We're going to kick this off. Our audience has got a little flavor of what our week's been like. So, Franky, why don't you introduce Kyle to our audience, and we'll just get going.
Okay. Well, cat's out of the bag. Kyle is our guest today, and, he's a truly dynamic person. He's an engineer. He's a CI thought leader, endurance athlete, husband, father. And for the past 15 plus years, he has been my brother from another mother. So Kyle Zachary, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Today, we're going to be talking about embracing discomfort, and it's embracing discomfort where you pause and you shift and you ignite. And so, as we get into this, I was thinking about a question for you, Kyle, when it comes to discomfort. And that is, when you look back, was there any defining moment that first forced you into discomfort, and how did you shape who you are today, or how did it shape who you are today?
It's a good opener. So it had to have been with the birth of my first daughter and then second daughter. I mean, my world completely changed by that great discomfort that comes from that moment, right? It's it's a positive discomfort. Here I am, early 20s, no idea what I'm about to get into. There's no manual on this. So it's like this immediate, I'm now responsible for this other human being. And then 3 years later, another human being. You got to figure out exactly what to do. I'm now responsible for a whole nother human being. And then from there, there's probably dozens of other pivotal moments throughout, professional career, setbacks as far as supposed to be getting a promotion or this role or that role or making this move and those not landing. But really what I would say is that very first pivotal moment was, becoming a dad.
I bet, Frankie, we could do a whole episode on that. Becoming a
Man,
parent.
I've been a parent for quite some time now, and I still don't think I've figured that one out. While I may be more comfortable, I definitely am not fully comfortable and free of discomfort when it comes to having to navigate that, because your kids are always changing and growing and evolving. So it's going to be new stuff that you have to figure out, and they find new and exciting ways to take you out of their comfort zone just about every day.
So Kyle kind of brought us into the different types of, discomfort. He talked about the different scenarios, personal with becoming a father. And then he also mentioned discomfort with work and career. So, discomfort comes in many shapes and sizes, right? It's not a cookie cutter kind of situation. And so, what is a definition of discomfort to you? And, how can that be applied to what we're talking about today? I'm going to start with you, Frankie.
Man, you're exactly right, though. There is no singular flavor of discomfort. It manifests physically, professionally, spiritually, in our relationships. And for me, if I try to take a step back and come up with a definition that encompasses all of those things, I think it kind of centers around control, or more appropriately, feeling like I have a lack of control. So if I think about, being a parent, I only have so much control in that situation with what's going on. Think about, being in a new situation where it's totally brand new and I haven't been there before. I don't have anything to base it on. I don't have control. So that raises my level of discomfort. So I think for me, it reminds me of a poem by, what was his name? William Ernest Henley, called Invictus. The last stanza, it said, I am the captain of my fate. I'm the master of my soul. And all of us want to think that we have that level of control, but in fact, we don't. And for me, when I come face to face with that lack of control, that's where I feel the most uncomfortable.
Yeah, I hear you. Kyle, what about you? So, you have this discomfort, and sometimes that discomfort is painful, right? So how do you discern what is, discomfort versus what is pain as you deal with some of these challenges that you come across?
Yeah, so I kind of see the two, they're on the same spectrum, right? Both discomfort and pain are part of the same spectrum. They're just at different ends. Discomfort's a little more mild and tolerable. Pain's a little more severe, and it's hard to ignore. As soon as I hear that, I think about, you go to a physical therapist or a doctor and they're like, hey, what's your pain like on a scale of 1 to 10? And they show you that chart. You got to pick a number. They got a bunch of like emojis up there with different feelings, and discomfort somewhere down there, 2 to 4. And then you got levels of pain up in the top range of that. And the other interesting thing is when you're there, your mind's tricking you into thinking you're really higher up on that scale than you probably really are at the moment. or you could be hiding in that comfort zone, really trying to like stay away from some perceived pain, that kind of thing. Your mind's tricking you either way.
Yeah, I look at discomfort more as, growth through things, right? There's a lot of uncomfortable situations that you can come into, but discomfort is, one of those growing pains. I remember my parents would talk about growing pains when I was younger, but usually those growing pains coming from them were, after I had gotten in trouble, got a whipping for something. So you're going through those growing pains. This is going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. I doubt it now,
Oh boy.
but but I look at discomfort as growth, right? That you're just growing through your challenge, growing through your setback. And pain is kind of a warning signal that says, hey, hold up. You might want to back away from this. Kind of like, you teach a kid not to touch a hot stove, right? They get close and they feel the warmth, but once they touch it, it's like, they quickly back away. And chances are that is a growing pain for them too, because they don't do it again. So that's how I look at the two um, different scenarios.
That's interesting,
Um,
Nooch. Before we move away from that, I kind of want to lean in on that too. To me, pain seems like there's no way to put a positive spin on pain. Pain seems like it is just innately negative. While it is a great teacher, like you just alluded to, like, touching that hot stove, it's still a negative experience. And, we're learning from that negativity. Whereas discomfort, like both of you alluded to, is something that can be additive. While it might not be something desirable, still ultimately additive in the space. My question for you, Kyle, is, discomfort has different levels, like you talked about on that spectrum. When you go to the doctor's office, how can we determine when we should lean in and, just kind of bear this discomfort versus pulling away?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the parenting and stuff we started with, right? Wouldn't it be great if there was a manual or a work instruction that kind of told you exactly what to do in those moments? But it's really so unique to every person and every situation that's hard to do. But if we're taking the approach that discomfort's really from a growth perspective, I think majority of the time, 80% of the time, you should lean in. If this is a true fill your cup good opportunity in the long run. Obviously, after you've, paused and thought about this, done reflection on the situation. If this is truly growth for you, then, lean in. Um, but if on the flip side, you've analyzed the situation and, maybe there are risks involved after that, or maybe it's not aligned with your values or something, there's something else there, then you probably want to run away. If it's going to, using the cup analogy, if you're emptying your cup and it's not in a positive way, run away. But if it's growth and filling your cup, giving you energy, lean in.
Yeah, I like that
Absolutely.
analogy.
I do too. Yeah, because if it's going to cause you harm, you definitely want to run away for sure.
Yeah, that kind of puts it in a lens for me, thinking about it in, you know, where you're looking at the outcome versus outputs, right? Because if you're in discomfort and you just keep, banging your head into the wall over and over and over and over again, trying to do the same things, yes, you're doing outputs, you're trying to move forward, but you're not getting to that outcome. So I think there's a balance to be struck there, in your decision-making process. Is this discomfort getting me to an outcome, or is this just an output, suffering for the sake of suffering?
So I think you're kind of pushing into maybe discomfort being at some point counterproductive.
I would imagine it could be. I mean, there can always be too much of a good thing. I mean, we can have too much water. You can die from drinking too much water. There's other things that are good for us, but if we have too much of it, we can, be harmed by it. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it possible for us to, try to bite too much off of the discomfort apple at one time?
I think, yeah, like you said, too much, there can always be too much of a good thing. You got too many things coming at you, bringing discomfort all at one time, you're going to be in like overload mode. It's one of those things that's, you want to tackle it in small wins and build up your confidence so that, you can start over time, you can start taking on more of that discomfort load, if you will. But at first you're going to have to ease into it and build your confidence.
Build some muscle memory.
Yeah, I think of it like, you have that work situation where there's so many different tasks that you need to accomplish. And are you going to take it on all yourself? I think that's where a lot of discomfort comes versus, sharing that load and letting some folks help you. And, even in personal, in your personal life. I think sometimes we take on so much, as Kyle alluded to, and we don't have a good support mechanism sometimes to help us through that discomfort. And so we put that elephant on our back and we try to run that 10 yards down the road, and it just crushes you.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and I think we want that there's a point to be made here is that we want to make sure our listeners understand. We're not suggesting that everybody just all right, yeah, nose to the grindstone. I'm going to suffer through this no matter what. We've got to make intelligent decisions about that. We got to assess where we are and what value we're getting out of the discomfort that we're experiencing. Because yeah, it is part of the growth process, but if it's not done in the right way, or we try to do too much too fast, it's going to have a negative result for us. And that's exactly what we don't want.
It can be a self-inflicting pain to take everything on yourself. Um, and I think that we do that sometimes unconsciously. But, I guess the question is, when is the discomfort, when it's just not worth it? Like, when do you make that decision when it's just not worth it, and you shift into a different situation or a different mode of operation?
Now you're talking about a really difficult decision at that point, right? So you're having been in moments, I've had moments like that in the past where, all right, so I was in a job, just feeling incredibly undervalued. Didn't seem like my role was really important in the company, and I was trying my best to continually influence. And then, there was plenty of times where that level of discomfort was kind of like battling the level of comfort I had. I was in an organization I'd been at for more than a decade. I knew everybody. I knew every inch of the facility. I could really do my job well. Um, but the discomfort had me, interviewing for other positions, thinking about leaving, had offers, turned them down because of the comfort of staying. And, in this situation, I was blessed that, the discomfort was, I was taken out of that situation. I ultimately got laid off. So, my reluctancy to lean into discomfort and go out, I kind of got, again, I was blessed with that decision was made for me. So it's a difficult challenge to think about how this discomfort I'm in is no longer worth it, and this new discomfort would be better for me.
Yeah, you were talking about, decisions being made for you. I think sometimes we end up in situations where as discomforting as it is, or as uncomfortable as it may be, we just keep pushing on, and um, we don't think about making the decision for ourselves to make a change. Um, that whole pausing and shifting is, evaluating your current state and then shifting into a new state. And so I think that we can't get lost on how uncomfortable we feel without going through some of the processes and using the tools in our toolbox to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, making sure that we're looking out for ourselves. So, I think to truly evaluate whether it's a personal or a professional situation, if it really makes sense, and if it's harmful to you, both physically and emotionally, um, then it may be time to shift into a different path.
Yeah. I mean, and, effectively when we're talking about this PSI framework, we're talking about change. We're trying to get out of a setback and change it into a comeback. So Kyle, what is it about change that seems to inevitably link it to discomfort?
Well, anytime you're talking about change, you're talking about something new, something different, something completely unknown. And I mean, just saying those words usually sparks a little bit of that discomfort signal, right? It's that
Hmm.
signal that this is, I'm pinging out of my comfort zone here a little bit. And, as I was thinking about the PSI framework. Each discomfort's also prevalent in each of those phases kind of in its own unique way, right? So like when you pause, stillness alone is, discomfort. Looking in the mirror, thinking about, being very introspective, that's terrifying. It's easy to look at everybody else and talk about, what needs to be fixed out there, but looking inward is way more difficult. And then you're also really trying to know yourself, right? Because you're pausing, you're thinking about what happened, learning about yourself in the process. It's all very, it's scary, it's uncomfortable. And then when you're thinking about shifting, trying to make a decision, what's scarier than a decision? Because when I was thinking about this, I thought about this, there's this what if monster, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it's always usually, for me personally, it's always pretty negative. The what if monster is a very negative dude. Like, or, it's always risks, consequences. But, what if the what if monster was, what if the opportunity was great? Or, what if I'm happier? How do you look at it from that perspective? And then on the Ignite side, now you got to actually do something. How uncomfortable is that? Like, I've only talked about, I've talked about it to this point, but now I got to actually go do something, and people might know, what's going to happen. Every step of the way is uncomfortable. But then on the flip side, I thought about a quote that, comes to mind all the time, which is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So you're sitting here on the cusp of a change, and there's this unknown cave ahead of you. But what if just on the other side of that is the actual treasure that you want? So, what's holding you back?
I like that analogy. I love that quote. I love that. Is it possible then to have change without discomfort? What do you think, Kyle?
No, I mean, it's inevitable, right? I mean, you can't hide from discomfort. You can't hide from change, even though we think we can. I don't. If it's a truly meaningful change, there's going to be some discomfort with it, and that's just where you have. That's where you have to have a plan.
Got to make it visible.
Got to make it visible. I can think of thinking about how Kyle described discomfort. I like the what if monster. I'm gonna keep that in the repertoire. I'll probably use that again at some point. So thank you for that, Kyle.
Oh goodness.
But is it possible to have change without discomfort? I agree with Kyle, because I mean, so many times when I was gonna make a change, I know professionally, I can remember a time when one of my leaders came to me and said, I think you need to apply for this position. I had said, I'm not ready for that. And he looked at me and said, yeah, you are. And so I can remember that uncomfortable feeling at that point was, I want to step into something that I truly don't think that I'm ready for. And, here's this guy, this leader that thinks that, I'm very ready for it. And, the long and short of it is that I stepped in, or I leaned in, and everything turned out really well. I guess I was ready because I was successful in that position. But if you don't, as Kyle said, walk into that cave, you could miss on a lot of really great opportunities. And then you get into a whole, you could get into a whole regret phase, which is not good. But stepping out there, leaning in and taking a chance. That's also what this whole shifting piece is about. Is it uncomfortable? Does it cause discomfort? Sure. Was it a painful change in my life at that point? I wouldn't say it was necessarily painful, but definitely uncomfortable. So leaning into that, going into that cave, I like that, Kyle. So we'll use that one too.
We're gonna have to get Kyle to sign a release for that, so we don't have to pay royalties for it.
There's no charge. These are all things I've learned from someone else, so I'm probably infringing on someone else's stuff already.
Oh man. So, speaking of learning things from someone else, we've been sharing some surface level stories, but, I think it's time for us to dive in a little bit deeper in terms of some of the experiences that we've had with discomfort. And, most of the things that we talked about is like, yeah, I leaned in and it was great, but I think it might be good to talk about times where we leaned in and maybe it wasn't so great, or we didn't lean in when we should have. And some of the things that were going through our mind, that was going through our mind as we encountered those situations. Um, yeah, just a couple of quick examples. I think it could be beneficial for us to, have that conversation with our audience here. Kyle, you want to lead us off?
Sure, yeah. I kind of was Nuge was telling his story about being presented a leadership opportunity. I had a interesting kind of counter situation to that when I was, early in my career. So, I'm a high achiever man. So, I was just trying to do my best at work, and um, there was some reorganization going on, and my boss was supposed to be moving to an up to another position, so that opened up a spot for me to potentially get a manager role or a supervisor role. And here I am, maybe 4 years in my career. Oh, this is gonna be great. I mean, I'm a superstar. And then the company introduces like a new screening test. Gallup does a leadership screening test. And I mean, long story short, I bombed the thing. And it was like this huge blow to my ego. Here, I was about to move up, you know, but in hindsight, I knew nothing about leadership. It was a discomfortable moment because here I am having my ego, torn apart. I was about to get a, promotion, and yet here I am now, well, far too many years later, but looking at it as a defining moment in who I've become over the last 10 years. Because it was then that I found out, no, I had no idea what leadership was. I started reading books, started engaging in more, leadership podcasts, taking in whatever I could. And it was through all that I learned, you know, I knew nothing about leadership at the time. And it
Okay.
ultimately set me on a path to being a much better leader today. Had I not been, in that incredibly discomfortable situation back then, who knows what the trajectory would have been.
Uh, so, Nude, you have an experience that you want to share with our listeners?
So discomfort as the good, the bad, or the ugly, huh?
Yes,
He's like, yes,
indeed.
that's exactly what we're talking about. I would say, a lot of my discomforting moments, I would say, or the discomforting moments were more professional than anything. And I think being on a job and having a task or a project and having that project uh, not go well, um, that's a very uncomfortable situation. And especially when it doesn't go well, and you're the one that all the fingers are pointing at, right? That it didn't go well, whether it was truly your error or not. And so I had an example. I had a situation where um, you know I had to pull off a project, and it was just an impossible situation, and it was during COVID, and so you know we were tasked with leading a group of people to do a task. Well, during COVID, you had a lot less people to work with, right? And so it was very difficult to meet deadlines and timelines for a task that you needed, say, six people to accomplish, and you only had two or three. And so having that situation day in and day out made it very difficult to be successful. And it was very painful. It was a very painful time. It was a painful for the folks that I was working with because they were doing the best that they could. It was a painful time for me because I felt like I was doing the best I could. But you have leaders who just want results, and it didn't matter that your staff was down 60, some days 70, 75% because of that stinging virus. So, and while, a lot of that was out of our control because of the illness at that time, the fact still remained that um, the goal, the deliverables, had to be met. So it was very difficult.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, because you can't just make people magically appear to get the work done. You got to kind of grab on and hold on best you can and get through it. I gotcha. So I have two, one a quick one and one is a little more in depth. One quick one I'll share because Kyle is involved in this particular story.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So, one thing that we like to do is obstacle course racing. So these are like the Spartans, the Tough Mudders. You hear people talk about mud runs and things like that. We were a little over the top for a while back there in 2000, from 2011 to 2015. We may have had a problem with obstacle course racing. So we were training. So it was me, it was Kyle, and another teammate, Tom. And what we had decided to do is we were going to make a weekend where we were going to do two races. We were going to do this one race on Saturday, which was a Spartan, and then we were going to do another race on Sunday, which was a Tough Mudder. And these are by no means easy endeavors. So to train, we decided we were going to go out to one of our favorite places, Umstead, and run on the trails. So we're talking roots and rocks and mud and leaves and all that other good stuff. So we had about a 6-mile track laid out that we were going to do. And this is the strategy we adopted. We said, all right, we're going to have a different person lead each of the 2-mile increments. And every mile, we're going to stop running and do burpees. Like I said, we had a problem. So, it gets to the point I lead out first, so knowing what we had in front of us, I take a less aggressive pace and we get through it. Struggling, I'm uncomfortable. And then lo and behold, it was Kyle's turn to lead. And Mr. Zachary decides he wants to take off through the woods running 7.5 minute mile pace, stopping to do these burpees and everything. I feel like I'm about to die. We get to the end of his segment. We're walking for a little bit. And then Kyle comes up to me and says, "Hey, you doing all right?" And Kyle, what was my response to you when you asked me that question?
I can't even hear you right now.
That's exactly what I said. Dude, I can't even hear you right now. My heart rate was so high. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. And, I wanted to quit. I did. I really wanted to stop right there. But community really helped me to make my way through.
Well, that's good stuff, guys. I think it's time that we bring this kind of full circle. So we talked a lot about discomfort. We talked a lot about pain. And I know our audience is, just wondering okay, when do we get to the good part? And so let's talk about, you've had some pausing and you've shifted into your different direction, and now it's time to ignite, to have action. That other scary part that Kyle alluded to earlier today, and how we move forward from some of this discomfort. So how do you move forward from the discomfort?
Well, I think the key is not to go at it alone. As Frankie talked about the running story, I'll quickly share a moment where I went at it alone. So in one of those same Spartan races, I went to a mountain race by myself, signed up for the competitive heat, and it was ultimately one of my, DNFs did not finish. I got a cut on my knee. Had to have some stitches, but it wasn't terrible. Ultimately, I could have finished, but I was by myself. So I was in the pain cave. I was discomfort. I was alone. But, ultimately I didn't finish. I walked away from it. I guarantee, had I not been alone, had there been someone there to laugh through the rest of the moments with, I would ultimately come out the other side. I think it's important to build those relationships with people that you really trust, that can be there to support you in the highs and lows, and then also hold you accountable. You need someone there to tell you when you need to push through, when you're kind of whining a little bit and there's more to give. And then that ignite phase is important. Getting moving, it's pausing and planning to shift are one thing. You got to act. It's when you take those small actions, right? You start building those bricks. Next thing you know, you got a wall. Next thing you know, you got a house. So take those small steps that build your confidence. And if I can, the last thing that I think is incredibly important, and it's something that I'm really working on myself, is give yourself grace. Like, personally, this is a big one for me. Um, it's not always gonna work. You might have some things you learn along the way. Give yourself some grace. At least you're out there trying.
Absolutely. Giving yourself grace, give yourself a break. I think that's really important as well. Um, you know, it's this whole discomfort piece. I mentioned that it was growth. It's kind of like you guys are talking about working out. I've never done any mud crawls or anything like that, but I can imagine the morning after, the second morning after, your muscles are just screaming, right? Because you just exerted so much. And so, you just grow past that. Your muscles um just, kind of settle into that new level, right? That new level. It's kind of like, lifting weights or whatever. You get to a certain plateau and then you just move past that. And what I really want to say to our audience is that don't be afraid of the discomfort. And I know it's easy to say that, but if you're in that pause and you feel that discomfort, just know that you can move past it. You can get to the other side. Um, and through that whole ignition, it's about action. It's about doing something. It's about taking the first step. Um, uh, you're you're never going to really know what you're capable of if you don't make some sort of effort to move past your discomfort. And that's when you can truly celebrate your accomplishment. You can look back on the discomfort. You can look back and see where you gave some good thought in your pause and how you shifted into a different light, into a different space, um, and moved out of it. But you have to take that first step. If you don't take a step, if you don't do something, you can never get past that discomfort where you are. And I think we all know that discomfort can suck you in, right? And we don't want to be there. We want to make sure that we are constantly moving in a positive trajectory to reach, our goals or, whatever is making us happy in our life. But the important thing is to do something. Don't just be stagnant. Don't wallow in your comfort, right? And don't let the what if monster catch you.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of, there's a little bit of humor to this one, but I think it lands. So every superhero started with some discomfort and pain. So what if the discomfort we're trying to avoid at any moment is that last step before we break through to being a superhero?
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, thank you, Kyle. We really appreciate you being here. We really do. And maybe in the future we'll have you back on another topic.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was great. I appreciate the invite and enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, maybe we'll bring you back on that whole parenting tip. You seem like you might have a few things to share there. And just to the audience, we want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We really appreciate our audience. We appreciate your comments and your feedback. We do look at that and we do respond. So we really appreciate all of that. And so just, remember, until next time, that setbacks are temporary and comebacks are most definitely legendary. And until next time, be brave and rise on purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PSI Effect podcast. This show doesn't happen without you, and you can connect with us via Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our website at thisispsipod.com and find us on YouTube and social media at This Is PSI Pod. That's at This Is PSI Pod. Until next time, remember, Be brave and rise on purpose.